Hi, this is Brad Tunney, and this is Max Loves Midland.
Welcome back to the Max Loves Midland show. I'm your weekly tour guide, Kevin LaDuke. And normally this guest is perched high atop Dow Diamond. But today he's here at JNC Media inside the Ashman Plaza. I'd like to welcome Brad Tunney.
Thanks, Kevin. Glad to be here.
Brad, thank you so much for being here today. Brad and I are buddies. We're going to have a good time today, and I'm really excited to have him here at the studio. When I told a lot of people you're going to be on today, they said that's a little bit of a cheat code. This is what he does professionally.
Cheat code for you.
Well, a cheat code for me, absolutely.
Yeah.
So, but like, how do you feel? Is this the pressure cooker, or how does this rank on pressure scales?
Probably pretty high. Most people probably, like, I'm extroverted, like being around people, like speaking. Obviously, otherwise I'd be in a torture chamber every day with what I do. But every kind of new variation of the way to speak is a different form of pressure. So, like, you know, there are a lot of lights in here and cameras and there's a timer and all these other things that are not typical for me to be talking into a microphone in front of. So it's a different pressure. Usually I just get to look over a baseball field, say what I see. When I don't get to see what I need to say, it's a little different, but still same vibes.
And if you've never seen his face before, you might recognize his voice. As the voice of the Great Lakes Loons, you've been in the area for how long now calling Loons games?
10 years, which feels like a lot to say. 29 years old. I started here when I was only 19. The radio station at the time, 100.9 FM, again, I will always say, was dumb enough to put a 19-year-old on the air somewhat full-time calling high school basketball and football games in the fall and winter of 14. And they haven't kicked me out since. And so I've moved through a bunch of different roles. But yeah, so the better part of 10 years, I've been working full-time here since 2017. So almost 8 years now, and been living full-time here since that point too.
It's absolutely amazing. So as somebody with a degree in electronic media broadcasting, it's a field that people say doesn't matter. Mm-hmm. It's a field that people say you won't be able to get employment in. Mm-hmm. And it's a field that people say sub 30, good luck getting a leadership position.
That's right.
You are kind of a cheat code for Max Loves Midland. We're talking about talent development retention, and we're talking about people development retention. You came to Midland with a goal to start a career. You've been in that career, and here you are. You've been inside of these city limits for a long time now.
And longer than I probably ever expected. Most people in what I do, and at the core of what I do, is broadcasting, right? And so my degree from Central Michigan University is as a broadcast and cinematic arts major. I have multiple other business degrees, but at my core, I'm a broadcaster. It's what I started doing when I was roughly 15 when I got onto a high school campus. So my ultimate goal at the end of the day is, yeah, I'd love to broadcast for my favorite team, the Detroit Pistons, or for any of local teams or any NBA team, frankly. But you know, to your point of, you know, most folks would look at a broadcaster and say, hey, you're going to need secondary work, or you're not going to ever have full-time work, or hey, nice hobby, or, you know, are you going to be able to support my daughter? You know, things like, you know, that I've heard from like my father-in-law at times, or maybe teachers when I was in high school of like, this isn't full-time job. You're going to have to work really hard at it. And it's like, do you not expect me to work really hard at it? So that's one point of it. But again, to your point, when I was going through college, I had a lot of folks in my life that were in their mid-20s and whatever were working multiple jobs to make ends meet to broadcast games. And the game broadcasts of it was the hobby part of it. And I had always told myself I was going to be willing to do that. If I needed to bartend or you know, work as a secretary or, you know, do odd jobs, mow lawn, drive Uber, do whatever it needed to be, I would do it because I love broadcasting games. And, you know, the real eye-opening piece of this for me when I moved to Midland full-time was I could start to sense that there was an opportunity for me to actually live here full-time and be content or happy doing it and not need secondary work. Not need secondary work that wasn't other broadcasts that I enjoyed doing, which I still fill my time with in the off-season because I love doing it. But I wasn't going to need to move somewhere out to the Dakotas or like out to the mountains or somewhere where, you know, I had people in my life that did and struggled for many years financially to do it because they loved broadcasting that much. And not to say that there weren't some financial struggles broadcasting on the radio when I was 19, 20, 21, 22, but it was worth it because I could see a potential in this city, and in particular in the organization that I'm at with the Loons and the Michigan Baseball Foundation in the way they develop talent, what they saw in me, what I thought were avenues for growth there that truthfully I did not see in other minor league baseball teams around the country that I was applying for, that I got jobs with and didn't take over the years, because I really believed in that place. And I still do, to the point where even now, family members and friends and people I meet all the time will ask, how are you still there? And it's probably a question that most people in our region get a lot. How are you still there? And that is multi-pronged, right? It's not just how are you still there personally, like, is there enough for you and your wife to do there? But professionally, how are you still there financially? How have you not grown out of that? And my answer is always the same. It's, I genuinely love where I'm at. And I think most people compete to be super happy in life as opposed to content. And I could not be more content than living in Midland and the surrounding communities, with the safety, with the growth opportunities, with things like this in particular, Max Loves Midland, that generates and fosters community for young people in our region, My Pros, the Loons, all those social entrepreneurship opportunities that are cultivated out of the ballpark, is a long-winded say of, it's okay when people ask you, how are you still there? Because genuinely, I have an easy response of, because I believe in it the same way the city and the organization in particular believed in me for so many years, and that's genuine.
What's awesome is I think about even what we're doing right now. It's a convergence, right? I'm in communications at the Midland Area Community Foundation. You are in broadcasting with the Great Lakes Loons. We're sitting here at JNC Media. Josh Ekman is producing this show. Yeah. It's just amazing to see this convergence of people within our field. 20 years ago, that wouldn't be happening in Midland. We always had Midland Community Television, which has been a community staple in supporting nonprofits, and then also folks at making their own media throughout the last 30, 40, 50 years, however long they've been around. It's just amazing to start seeing this convergence of media come to a head. And growing up, I always kind of wanted to be not necessarily a sports broadcaster, what you're doing, before I found out that I didn't necessarily want to be on news or go to authentic television. I thought, maybe I'd be on TV and I'd do sports broadcasting on news. Well, it's not exactly what happened. So I'm assuming with a voice like yours, you always wanted to be a broadcaster, right?
Yeah, I mean, after I hit puberty at like 17 or 18 and developed it, right? So I didn't really have a voice for it until I was probably 18, 19 years old. And it's not like, oh, you're a basketball player, you grow to 6'7", well, you've got a 6'9" dad and a 6'4" mom. Not a surprise that you got into the NBA at 6'7" or 6'8". A voice is a little different. And I always tell young broadcasters these days too that, maybe struggle with their on-air voice. Not everyone is going to have as deep a tone as I have, and I don't take that for granted, because it allows me to be a little lazy at times on air because the voice can carry me. And again, I don't take that for granted because it's such a big part of what makes a good broadcaster. But it also can be developed over time. My wife will tell you, and she'll joke about it with friends and family, like, he didn't always sound like that. And there are people around me that are like, why do you talk properly like that? Well, for 3 hours every day for the better part of a decade, this is how I talk. So naturally off air, that's how I'm going to talk. And that's not in eliminating likes or filler words or certain things that people use as verbal crutches, right? It's also a tone, a depth, a confidence. And so all of those things are just developed because I have the benefit of forced practice, because the moment I turn the mic on for 3 hours every night, I just have to engage in the practice of converting my voice a little bit. Whereas most people are just casually talking for every hour that they're awake. I didn't really have that luxury, which is good. But again, another investment in me back in when I was 19 years old at the radio station in the Ballpark was, let's just throw this kid on terrestrial radio with no real evidence that he won't start cussing up a storm on air, because that would be a disaster. And over time, the voice just developed in that way, and I'm lucky that it has, because it's allowed for a lot of opportunities, if that makes sense.
So do you ever get recognized by your voice? Are you ever out in public and you're having a conversation with someone? You're at the Jimmy John's line, you're hanging out, and you're stopping by to get your favorite sandwich. Is somebody like, is that the Loons guy?
No. I mean, yeah, it happens, but not as much as I think people would think. Like, my wife gets asked by her friends all the time, is it annoying that, your husband just sounds like that all the time? And it's like, what do you mean sounds like that? That's how he sounds. He's a human, right? I think it's cool, and this is what I try to talk to other broadcasters around the country about too that struggle with a connection, because at the end of the day, we're terrestrial radio. We know what that means. And yeah, you can view Loons games on television, on MLB.TV and all these other avenues. But organically, locally, my goal is to create some form of FOMO for people that organically and casually drop into 100.9 in the region. And then they hear it and they go, oh man, that sounds major league. That's a major league product. Let me go to the game. And it's only $10 and it sounds like that. Sure, I'll be there. That's my goal on air. But on top of that, I don't make the assumption, because again, I don't think I'm really anyone. I shouldn't walk on the street and like have any ego about it, because I'm just talking on the air for a couple of hours on terrestrial radio, no less. Like, I get what that means in this day and age. 30 years ago is far different, but I don't necessarily think anyone's listening, even though we have all the numbers that indicate that people do really listen. And when people see me, they're like, oh yeah, I listen all the time. Oh, that makes me feel nice. And it genuinely does. But I don't assume that people are listening, because then it gets a little scary, actually. Just like this, like there's cameras. I know people are watching right now. That's a little different than me just being able to black out, turning on a microphone, and it being therapy for me for 3 hours, which it is for a lot of broadcasters. And for me, it is in particular. I get to black out on air, say what I see, and it's therapy for me after a day of work, for the most part, or a day of dealing with whatever it is. So I'm very grateful for that part of it. But just getting like recognized on The Voice, more times than not, it's, hey, I'm Brad. I go meet with a season ticket holder or a client that I've never met before, and I like interacting because, again, extroverted, want to meet people. I genuinely believe in what we do at the ballpark and at the org, providing a third place or a community piece, a pillar of the region and of Midland. So go meet with people. Hey, I'm Brad. I thought I heard that voice was recognizable. So they'll, after I introduce myself, connect the dots between the name and the voice, as opposed to me standing in the line at Lalonde's Market or something and them just being like, oh, that's Brad. Yeah, he's in aisle 2, because they can hear me talking to my wife or something. That's different. It's more so connecting the name and the voice, I think.
And you said you get recognized by kids a lot, correct?
Yeah, which is crazy, because I would think most people assume no one under the age of like 16 is listening to terrestrial radio. And for whatever reason, that is just not the case. It shocks me the amount of times, and maybe it's just because they think it's cool, because, not to inflate what I do, but I think it's cool. I think we should all think what we do is cool. I think broadcasting is cool. The booth is cool. We have the best broadcast booth in the country in the minor leagues, genuinely. It's large. There are all these flashing lights. There's multiple people in there. There's still the magic, just like there's magic in this room with a bunch of cameras and lights and everything, of creating content. And even more so now, the kids that scroll on their phones all day, when I say kids, like you and I do it all day.
Absolutely.
Right? Like we're all stuck watching Reels and TikToks. Probably viewing this on a Reel or TikTok right now. They think content is cool, and what we do is provide content. It's journalism, it's entertainment. We're entertaining. We're hanging out with you for 3 hours. Most people are listening to us either driving around trying to be entertained or sitting in their garage drinking a beer, doing whatever, and hanging out with us. We're just a friend to listeners. We want it to feel like that. So when it comes to kids recognizing us, whether it be, the other day I was at the community center and I was walking out, and my broadcast partner and I, John, were walking out, and 2 or 3 kids, probably 12 years old, I don't know, that would be like the 6th, 7th, 8th grade, and goes, hey, those are the Loons guys. And it was like, how would they have known that? But we're on field pregame. We're sitting up on the booth, and sometimes, whether we walk out of the booth or they see it, maybe their parents listen to games. They've seen photos because we're, doing availabilities like this. But that's pretty cool. And then, talking to their parents and saying, hey, bring them up to the booth sometime. And we keep it fun in the booth. We've got a mini basketball hoop. We've got like 100 bobbleheads. There's flashing lights in there. We put the headsets on them. We've got the best view in the ballpark. And so it becomes kind of a part of the museum of the ballpark. Like at the end of the day, Dow Diamond is somewhat of a museum of entertainment. There's the Midland County Sports Hall of Fame. There's all these little intimate spaces around the ballpark. The batting tunnels are cool. We can take tours of all these spaces. And the radio station is part of that, despite radio in some people's minds being this like archaic piece of our community. I tend to think it's a pretty cool piece of the community, even for kids aged 8 to whatever. The number of kids that have been introduced to me by their parents, whether it be from 8 or 10, I have 2 in particular that are great stories. That one I met many years ago. his grandparents got him as a birthday present a day in the booth with me. It was like they emailed me and they said, "Hey, would this be something you'd be willing to do? Do you even do something like this?" And I was like, "I'm overly flattered that you would think that he would enjoy this enough, but can I provide enough entertainment to him? I'm just going to be on air all day." And they were like, "He listens to every game. He will love it." And he has now grown into someone that pays a visit up into the booth all the time. He's a sophomore, junior in high school now, and wants to be a broadcaster, and has turned into a great writer at Midland High School, and does all these things in a journalism front because of what his grandparents saw in the value of introducing himself to radio, to the Loons, and to baseball. And so I think a lot of parents bring their kids to the ballpark, and they get infatuated with players, and that's fine, but there's a small fraction of kids who are coming in that if I can hand them a baseball as opposed to a player handing them a baseball, maybe they now have this desire to broadcast or to view the ballpark in a different lens than maybe their parents intended to. And that's how we can create little moments for people at the ballpark that are different than the average ballpark, because we own the radio station, and I feel like we should be willing to go out of our way to introduce them to radio because we own the radio station, which is entirely unique. We're the only venue in all of the country with a terrestrial radio station built into it. That's unique about this community. Like, I think that's a cool part of, like, Max Loves Midland. Hey, it's unique, like genuinely one of a kind. As overused as the word unique is, it is one of a kind that a terrestrial radio station is built into our ballpark. And so introducing kids to that and fostering an environment of like love for that piece of their community is really cool to me.
If we had a TikTok camera, I'd say, turn on the TikTok camera right now. We might clip that down anyways. I love that you told the story about the young man that listens every single day and listens to your play-by-play and listens to the call. Because growing up, you and I both kind of grew up in kind of single child situations, right? Like, there wasn't really anyone else around, no siblings. So I would stand in my driveway and I'd dribble the basketball all day, and I'd always have music on, and like I would DJ through the radio, or during the wintertime, I'd have, college basketball on the TV in the basement, and I'd be in the mirror, and I was fortunate enough to have those places to be able to do that, and that was a big part of my life. So I'm imagining you stood out with your baseball glove and your baseball, and you listened to all of this, and you did play-by-play of baseball, right? That was your thing, or?
Yeah, I mean, for the most part, again, only child. You and I talked offline before this, and it's like, you brought something to my light that was really interesting to think about as an only child, in that most people think only children are, they lack creativity because they don't have siblings like beating them up and like doing these other things, and like they're not fostering this environment of creativity. And you and I started talking, it's like you're almost forced to be more creative as an only child at times, because you're creating everything for yourself all the time. So to your point, yeah, I would stand in the backyard with a baseball glove and a bat, glove in hand, bat in the other, toss the ball up to myself, swing, hope it stayed in the air long enough to run to the opposite side of the deck or the yard and make the catch, and announce the whole thing as if I was three different people, right? Pitcher, batter, fielder. And so doing that with the idea of Mario Impemba and Rod Allen, who I grew up watching the Tigers with on Fox Sports Detroit, same way of doing it with the Pistons, of mimicking all five starters from Chauncey to Rip to Tay to Sheed and Ben, and even the Chucky Atkins of the world and Jerry Stackhouse, like a little bit more towards your era in the early 2000s, and dribbling the ball as all five guys and yelling at them as if I was Larry Brown, and then doing the call of all of it as George Blaha and Rod Allen, and at times on the radio, Mark Champion. All of that, Lions broadcasters, Red Wings, like doing it all in my driveway by myself. And part of that subconsciously, it took me until a long time in broadcasting to be like, man, that, we talk about like things that pop up as trauma out of your childhood. That pops up as a cultivating moment to get me to where I am now, that I never really thought about until I was like fully developed in my 20s, right? To think that's the kind of stuff you don't think about as an only child. Most people think, only children are held back in some way from creativity and just from, social and development. That, as an only child, is a reason why I'm here now, which was like was a really cool epiphany that you landed on for me like a week or two ago when we were talking about it, because I never really connected those dots. So that was really cool.
Yeah, I think it's one of those things where you're almost pushed into finding that creativity and looking for ways to explore, but also being encouraged to be able to do that, right? Like we have great people around us that really helped cultivate those ideas in our brain that we can do whatever we want and we can go after goals and we can be a part of this creative space. Even 2009, I graduated high school and I went to SVSU. And my first day at college, they asked me, "What do you want to do when you grow up?" And I said, I think there's going to be a space in the social media world. You know, grow up. It's funny. You're 18 years old. You're already grown up.
Good guess.
And I'm like, I think there's going to be a space in the social media world. They audibly laughed at me. 2 years later, there was jobs in those spaces. 10 years later, I was actively working in one of those spaces. So it's just kind of amazing the way that everything turns and the way that me and you were able to find some passions and really turn them into careers and be so thankful that we're doing them here in Midland. But those first games you were calling at those times, I mean, we talked about your time at CMU. We talked about now getting to Midland and working for the Great Lakes Loons. But your first baseball game you called wasn't until you arrived here, correct?
For the most part, yeah. So my first baseball game with the Loons was opening weekend of the 2015 season. I had just turned 20 years old. I was working with Chris Fosters, who turned into a great mentor and like developed me not only on air, but the understanding of baseball. I watched a lot of baseball when I was a kid with my grandma, but never played the sport, which dumbfounds most of the players that I speak with during the season because we developed great relationships with the players over the years. And, I think all of them assume, well, what level of ball did you play? Like you had to have played like at least some pro ball or at least college ball, right? And it's like, I never swung a competitive bat in my life. Not once did I play t-ball. I was a youth soccer player growing up, and that was it until I got to high school and I played football, basketball, and soccer. And so I never swung never threw a competitive ball, swung competitive bat in my life on the baseball field. And so it took me a long time to the point of, again, the organization putting a lot of faith in me at the time and dumb enough to put a lot of faith in me when I showed up on that opening day in 2015 and had no idea how to score a baseball game and was on the air in a top 150 market in the country doing a Dodgers affiliated, right, the brand of the Dodgers, baseball game on terrestrial radio as one of only 160 broadcasts in the country because there was 160 minor league teams at the time. And so I never take for granted even now the opportunity that was offered, the faith that Chris and trust in Chris put in me to be a partner in that way because he didn't have a choice over the matter. And me sitting down with a pencil and figuring out when a ball was hit to shortstop and the shortstop threw it to first base, what I wrote in my book for that. As dumb as that sounds, because most watching understands that that's a 6-3 put out. I did not know that the shortstop was 6 and the first baseman was 3 during my first ever professional game broadcast. And I was lucky enough to be on the air and had no idea how lucky I was to be on the air doing it. The other shocking thing that I tell people is when I toured CMU once before I went there. So my parents drove up. We obviously drove through Midland because we're from Metro Detroit. So we drive through 75 and 20 and 10, and we drive past. And at the time, Central Michigan University had the title partnership of the Batter's Eye at Dow Diamond. And so I was so naive to what minor league baseball was, even getting to CMU, having no idea that within 18 months I was going to be calling professional baseball at that said stadium. I thought that was CMU's baseball stadium. I did not know Dow Diamond was a professional baseball stadium. I assumed, again, very naively, that 30 minutes away from campus was the Central Michigan baseball stadium, because of course it would be 30 minutes away. It wouldn't be on campus. That'd be crazy. I didn't know how the minor leagues worked. I didn't know that the Tigers had a minor league team in West Michigan. That's how naive I was to baseball itself. I didn't know that the catcher was 2. I didn't know that the pitcher was 1. I didn't know what a fielder's choice was until I got to the Loons, and I was already on the air doing it. And so I had to really get after it quickly. Otherwise, I was going to sound really dumb for a long time, and I probably did. But again, that was the trust that they put in developing me coming from CMU when the org was in a pinch. And it's why, even to this day, I think about those moments, not knowing that Dow Diamond was even a professional baseball stadium, or not knowing what a 6-3 groundout was, not knowing how to approach players, despite me being their age, right? We were a low A team. Most of our players at that point were somewhere between 19 and 23. I was 19 and 20. I viewed them like they were 30-year-old Hall of Fame major leaguers. It's crazy to think back then how much I had to learn quickly to figure it out, and the org supported me through it all.
It's absolutely amazing. I think that speaks to the support that you've had here at Dow Diamond and with the Great Lakes Loons and with now 100.9 The Mitt. Prior to all of that, you were able to get a lot of great broadcasting experience in high school, which a lot of us may not have had an opportunity to do so. Can you talk a little bit about your high school experience? Where did you go to high school and what that was like for that program?
Yeah, I mean, super lucky. To this day, I have no idea what I'd be doing professionally if not for, and I went to Lance Cruz High School, which is in the Harrison Township, Mount Clemens area in Metro Detroit, East Side. I got to high school. I wanted to be a varsity basketball player, varsity soccer player, do the sports thing. Who knows what I would have done going to college? I was a pretty poor student. So again, what would I be doing right now? I have no idea, but I got to school. I attended my first ever high school football game there. And I ended up having a couple of kids that were like, not bullying me in any way, but they were seniors, and they just started throwing a football around towards me. I was like, oh, okay, this seems fun. Extroverted kid, just kind of walked up and said, hey, can I join playing catch? There's footballs being tossed around at a high school football game all the time. And walked up to them, and through some conversation, for whatever reason, the senior there, to me, treated me with a ton of respect and was like, oh, yeah, hey, how's it going? What's your name? I was like, oh, this high school thing is pretty nice. All these kids are nice to me, right? Like, that's obviously the high school movie version of this. But he was very nice. He goes, what do you plan on doing here? I was like, I don't know, showing up every day, like talking to girls and making friends. I don't know.
Going to class. Hopefully you're not shoving me in a locker.
Right, yeah. Please be nice to me, big senior guy. And he's like, well, I'm in the broadcast program. You should just come check it out one time. I was like, okay, that's weird. I'm not going to be a broadcaster. And then a kid who I had morning class with, who I had catechism with growing up. We went to different middle schools, but we went to the same church and catechism. And he started being interested in broadcasting. And I was like, maybe this is like a cool club. Maybe I join this thing. So I showed up to a meeting. I was like, I don't know if these are really the folks for me. I'm going to play these. I'm going to be sports guy. I'm going to do the sports thing. And then basketball season rolled around, and the broadcast club was like, hey, we really think you should join us. They were just begging for bodies, right? And I was going to try out for the basketball team. My dad and I sat down together, and my dad goes, I don't think you should play basketball. I think you should do this broadcasting thing. And I was like, why? I was so mad at him because I loved basketball. We had a hoop in our driveway. I loved it. I played every day. That was my thing. I wanted to play basketball. And he was like, I think you should try this broadcasting thing, to the point where he kind of forced me to do it. And I was so mad at him my whole freshman year of high school, because I was like, I used to go to my mom, why is dad forcing me to do this? I just want to play basketball. Why at this point would he step into my life and force me to do this broadcast club? And again, the rest is somewhat history on that front, because I never played basketball in high school. Every year, the coach and all my buddies who I played basketball with in middle school were like, what are you doing? Why don't you, I was on the 7th and 8th grade teams. I was a starter on the 7th and 8th. Play basketball. What are you doing with this broadcast thing? My dad just never let me play it. And it was, again, I would have no idea what I was doing. And so while I was at Lance Cruz, we had closed circuit television, full system with TriCasters and replays and this whole broadcaster club and all these technical things that you and I know about that no one else cares about. But it's the same equipment that we use now at the ballpark, high-end stuff. And had a great broadcast teacher that I still keep in contact with now. In fact, I had his family up last summer to a Loons game. He brought his kids up. And so this has come full circle with him. Great mentor of mine, and a guy who I've had in my back pocket forever. Talking about a high school teacher, really influencing your life. That's what teachers should be doing, is influencing young people. And so I owe so much to Steve Miller down at Lance Cruz. And so got through that, broadcasted every year. By the time my senior year rolled around, I had done state finals for the MHSA network at the Breslin Center. I had done state finals of football at Ford Field because they had a student radio network throughout the state. And so we were the students, because there's only so many television and radio stations in high schools these days. And then senior year, we were approached by a small investor of sorts locally that was like, hey, I want to do local games. I just need broadcasters. I'm going to sell it and do all these things. We're obviously not going to pay you anything. And I was like, yeah, that's fine. And so the teacher said, are you willing to do this? Like, you're going to be broadcasting 2 games for us at our high school every week. And then every Friday night, you're going to do a local Macomb area conference game of the week at the big schools, Dakota and Eisenhower and Chippewa Valley. And you're going to go around the region. Like, are you and Adam comfortable driving around to do these things with your own equipment and everything? It's like, yeah, why wouldn't I be? And so we had branding, we had logos made, we had a website made, and we did this whole thing as seniors in high school, which really set the tone for then gaining some business knowledge on how this is operated, what's it cost to put on a broadcast. Started gaining some of that knowledge as a senior, got to CMU, developed a little more under some mentors, did an internship at Detroit Public Television and met a great mentor there who is still operating all of Detroit Public Television right now, that sat me down and said, look, man, you're going to, if you want to do this, you got to work 80 to 100 hours a week. Like, enough with this college stuff. Are you going out all the time and doing these things? Like, if you want to do this, you better be waking up at 6 a.m. and grinding, because this industry sucks and it's going to suck unless you really want it. And so, graduating from CMU early because I knew that I just needed to get out and start the fight. But again, had offers to move to Arkansas and other states. And for whatever reason, despite, I think, sometimes people around me saying, go take that full-time job somewhere else. What are you doing waiting around here? It just always felt right here in Midland with the Loons, with MBF. And it eventually worked out. But there were some patient years of, man, is there going to be full-time work here? Is the radio station going to last all these years? What does minor league baseball look like coming out of the pandemic, even when there were questions? I was laid off at that point. Minor league baseball teams were getting cut around the country. And while the Loons will never be cut because we have a beautiful ballpark, the Dodgers great support from Dow, great leadership and Bill Stavropoulos and everyone around here. And it speaks to the community. And we see that now with like the Dow Championship and the Memorial Cup in the region of when the region wants to do something big, they can. And we think in a very small way, we're doing something big every Tuesday to Sunday night, every other week during the summer. So again, long-winded way of connecting the dots from high school to now, I guess.
Well, we've talked about this before, and you said I get emotional about this.
Yeah.
And you said it means a lot to me, right?
Yeah.
Like, this is a huge part of your life, and obviously you're on this destination, and everything's kind of lined up to this place. But the Loons are special for not only the folks that work for the Loons or around the Loons, but for all of us as Midland citizens. And for a lot of us, it's a place where we gather with friends, and it's a very, very important third place for us. I don't know if I would live where I live right now if the Great Lakes Loons didn't exist and Dow Diamond didn't sit on the other side of downtown. When I was kind of in a career fork, I had some different options in different places, and I remember having a conversation after a Detroit Tigers game in downtown Detroit. Mm-hmm. And during that conversation, I said, man, how great is this? You can come down, you can go to a game, you can go to a restaurant, you can walk around with your friends, you can meet with people. And I was stopped in my tracks in that moment. The person I was with said, Kevin, you do that all the time. The Loons sit on that one end of downtown. You can go out, you can have a drink with friends, you can go get dinner with friends, you can go gather at the park, you can walk the Tridge with your family, whatever it is, and however you want to celebrate in conjunction with a trip to a Great Lakes Loons game. That's one of the things that keeps me in town. And if I wasn't able to find the place that I live right now, near downtown, I don't really know if I'd be here right now. And I love my work, and I love my job, and I love what we're able to do in Midland. But the Loons are such an important component of me being in Midland that I couldn't imagine this town without them. So a couple years ago, there was a bogus post saying the Loons were getting cut. I remember my heart sank through the floor. I won't let you get into that one because I'm sure you had a...
Yeah, it was tense at the time. And we all had confidence that we will be here forever, but yeah.
It's absolutely an amazing setup. So how is the setup different for the Loons compared to other teams? You touched on it. You said something about the foundation. You mentioned Bill Stavropoulos. You mentioned having a station inside the ballpark. Did you say that's the only one that you can think of like that?
Yeah, again, to our knowledge, and when the station was built in 2009, guaranteed, maybe there's a station built since then, but to my knowledge, it's the only pro sports venue in the country that has a radio station fully operational out of it, which means there is no auxiliary studio down the street. For Tigers games in particular, their radio broadcasters show up at the ballpark, they go to their press booth, but all of the equipment is still needed to broadcast the game. For us, there is a button in my countertop that I press and I go live with it. There is no box necessarily that uses a phone line or an Ethernet line to connect to an auxiliary studio. Like in Detroit, the Detroit Tigers radio station is located in Birmingham. And so it's not downtown Detroit. If there is an issue with the broadcast, it's a 20-minute, 30-minute drive away from the facility. There is remote equipment that's needed. For us, it's not. Our producer, if there's an issue, is 8 steps behind me. All the equipment is there. So my office in the off season is the ballpark. No other broadcaster in the country, well, in the minors, that's true, because if they're full-time, they're doing media relations or sales or something in the off season. But hardened broadcasters at this level that work for a radio station the way I do, I don't work for the Loons necessarily, do not have an office in the ballpark, and we do. Not only that, it's in the press box. So if you've ever visited, you know where the radio station is upstairs. If you haven't yet, would love to have people come by. I think the story that you tell about like being in Detroit and having that realization is amazing, because there's obviously been times throughout the years of like my wife and I, with her work or my work or whatever, considering moving. And one big thing for me is like proximity to professional sports, just like for you, clearly.
Absolutely.
And you had that realization of like, yeah, we're 2 hours from Detroit, and you've got a Detroit City Football Club hoodie on right now, so that's important to you. For me, it's the Pistons and proximity to the Pistons. We're season ticket holders for the Pistons, and so proximity there is important. I would never move anywhere that wasn't a Major League Baseball or an NBA city. Granted, we live in a city that doesn't have either of those, right? But we have proximity, 2 hours. That's a drive. That's not a full day trip. You can drive and drive back in a night, as we do all the time. And we have professional baseball here. And to your point of being able to live downtown, walk to that venue where most nights during the summer, Thursday through Sunday, there's going to be 4,000, 5,000, 6,000 people there, which a packed stadium there with 6,000 people feels a little different than going down to Comerica Park, 4-hour drive, the cost, the parking, the time it takes to watch right now an inferior product, and be in a stadium that fills 35 to 40,000 with maybe 15 to 20,000 in the stadium. It's a little bit different there, as you and I both know, when there's 5 to 6 in a stadium that fits 5. That is really cool. And it's more impactful because you can see, touch, and feel the players for kids too. And getting back to why it's like special for me and somewhat like emotional to tie, because the mission of the ballpark is something that I believe in. And I think it's really cool, because I know you feel the same way about working somewhere where you believe the mission, right? Like working at the Community Foundation. You believe the mission of the Community Foundation and its purpose in this market. Like to your core, you believe in it, which makes waking up and doing it every day so much more impactful. And for me, at the ballpark, the mission is not necessarily put on a great show for families and fans. That's obviously part of it. But the mission at the end of the day of why the ballpark was brought here in 2007 by Bill and Dow and all the supporting partners was to drive the economy and social entrepreneurship and community for downtown and the surrounding region. And in my role in particular at the ballpark, I feel like I can really do that. And while other roles do, but like I get to externally do that every day, selling to local businesses the idea of growth and lead generation, and to talk positively about them on air, and digital components and signage, and doing all of the sales things that we have a chance to do to help grow small businesses that we believe in, right? Like the clients that I get to work with, I genuinely am there all the time, right? Like I think about the mom and pops that are downtown Midland right now. I think about the businesses that we utilize around town. Like my wife and I are genuinely in those businesses all the time because we believe in them. We believe in the people. We have relationships there. And so, you know, it's a great story that you tell about being in Detroit, having that realization and thinking, I can walk there. That's why the ballpark's here, because it drives people like you to want to stay here. It retains good talent for this region. It retains families to want to grow in what is, I think, the safest place in the state. That's the reason the ballpark is here. And I really believe in that because I grew up in a larger area, Metro Detroit. I grew up with what I think is the best sports radio station in the country. And when, you know, maybe sneaking ahead of here a little bit, when I had an opportunity to pitch this idea of a rebrand for our radio station last summer from an ESPN affiliate to a Fox affiliate, rebranding with the Mitt logo and becoming super local and becoming a real brand in the region and building out a marketing budget so we can give bigger to nonprofits and support high school athletes with scholarships now and do all these things that we're doing financially for the region. I wanted to do it in a big way because I grew up with a radio station that I listened to every day. And I wanted to bring that to this region and allow Midland to take ownership of what the Mitt has become inside the ballpark. And so not only can the ballpark and the Mitt drive social entrepreneurship, grow small business, create community in a third place, I don't necessarily get to use it as a third place the way you do, right? Like you get to show up casually, enjoy dinner and a beer, and it's really nice. It's not to say that on some off days there's not a chance to enjoy an off day or a dinner and a beer, whatever it is. But I don't get to enjoy it the same way you do. But I get to enjoy it by looking over everyone. And that's where when I sign off some nights, and I'm a crier, I get that from my dad. I cry heavily. Ask my wife or anyone that went to our wedding. Like I cried the entire day. But there are some days that I get choked up getting off the air. And the reason why I can barely make it off the air at the end of the season, because I love it so much. Having this as a part of the community and having it viewed the way it is, or at least I hope it's viewed that way, because, we had the 4th of July game for the first time in almost 15 years at the ballpark on, last week. And looking down over the ballpark at the end of the night, after the Midland City fireworks were taking place beyond our walls because we had a delay, and so it didn't time up perfectly, but everyone in the ballpark sat there on the berms of the outfield. Were you there that night?
I was there that night.
And you could see the fireworks from behind us.
Absolutely.
See the game, a normal professional baseball game, and then our fireworks shows goes off, which, and I don't say this as like a braggadocious thing, it's the best fireworks show in our league. Like, it is not invested in our league the way we do it at Dow Diamond. It's a real show at our ballpark as opposed to these little backyard shows at other ballparks. And I look down and I think, like, hearing people clap, I'm like a 1/10% of what happens at that ballpark in terms of putting on the actual show. Not even a 1/10%, but it makes me feel good to be a part of seeing people enjoying themselves in this region and in Midland in particular, because I genuinely believe in it. And so when I see other people genuinely enjoying themselves in it, it just it gives you purpose, right? To fight for the city and fight for the region a little bit more, knowing that there are families who enjoy it. There are people like you, 20s, 30-year-old people, where when I joined here, it was like, well, no one in their 20s lives in Midland. And it's just not true, right? Like, we've seen it over the years with the beer garden. We've seen it at events at the ballpark. We've seen it at other third places that we attend. It's just not true. At the Dow Championship, when we go and visit there, people in their 20s live here. Families live here. We're evident of that. And yeah, we go visit other areas in the state. That's what is also great about living here. 2 hours from Grand Rapids, 2 hours from Traverse City, 2 hours from Detroit. If you live in any of those other 3 areas, you're not within a drive of the other ones, except you are here, which is really cool. Again, long-winded answer of explaining, like, I genuinely believe in it because of the mission of the foundation, which gives back a ton of money to the community. And the radio station in particular, our give back into that foundation fund is somewhere between $40,000 and $60,000 a year. We have no ownership there. If the ballpark sells tomorrow, all the money goes back into Midland, period. That feels really good. The same way like the foundation, right? Like, your dollars are local and will always be local. That just feels really good to say. There is no one hawking us living in Florida or somewhere else looking at a bottom line. Like, I really believe in that in a small community. And we do it every day.
Well, it becomes mission-based.
Yes.
And you talked about the ballpark as an asset, and it's part of a much larger map of the community of Midland. It is low barrier to entry in terms of monetary cost. Mm-hmm. And you can gather, and we talked about that gathering. You gather at Comerica Park. You're with thousands upon thousands of people sometimes. And when you're doing that, you're not going to see other people you know. You're not really connecting with people. I'm not meeting a lot of strangers at the ballpark. Maybe somebody that sits beside you. You might have fun heckling in right field with somebody else.
A little less community, though.
A little less community. You go to a Loons game, I could see teachers from when I was a kid. I could see family members. I could see friends.
Some people might not want to see teachers from when they were kids.
Hey, that's true. That's true.
That's why I avoid my hometown sometimes.
Yeah, you're like
seeing high schoolers. Yeah,
you're like, the best part about Midland is I never see teachers from high school. No, it's just absolutely amazing, and it's just Midland itself. you talked about the location as an asset. So you and your wife like to spend time throughout the state, correct?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So what does it mean to you to have a space in Midland where you can go get away to those places that you like other than Midland and use Midland basically as an asset piece for location, but not necessarily for what's in Midland, because we know the things here are great and we have a lot of great offerings. But how does Midland function as a location piece?
Yeah, well, and I've got to, like, my wife and I talk about this all the time because we could move to any of those areas or, and obviously have to leave here and whatever else, but living in all those areas are far more expensive than it is here. And we realize that. It then becomes more expensive to travel to the other areas because, again, the proximity to those spots. But, yeah, I mean, we're in Detroit once a week in the baseball offseason during the winter. Our families are there, so that's part of it. But also, we just genuinely like being in downtown Detroit. We grew up in Metro Detroit. I think we're somewhat rare in that we came from big city and now have anchored in small Midland, whereas a lot of people that live around here, and I think you're an example of this, grew up in a smaller surrounding city or town, and Midland was the big city, and now you've kind of leveled up in terms of population size. We were the rare case of growing up in Metro Detroit. She went to school in Grand Rapids. I went to a Division I Central Michigan University, and now we've decided to downsize to Midland, but it has the community aspect where we can go into any bar, any restaurant, and like know people. That's not typical of where we grow up. Like I graduated with 420 people, which is far bigger than what either high schools here have here, obviously. So proximity to Detroit is great. Example, last night we went and had dinner in Lansing, right? Like that's not possible if we lived in Traverse City. And might it be possible if we lived in Detroit or Grand Rapids? Possibly. But it's also not possible if we lived in Grand Rapids to necessarily just like jump over to Traverse City to have dinner. But we did that last night.
But you're here. You can go to all those places from here within, 2 hours?
Well, yeah. People think I'm crazy that I say, oh, yeah, I'll drive down and back for a Pistons game once a week in the winter. We have season tickets. That's what we do. 2 hours down, 2 hours back, leave work 4 o'clock, get there at 6, watch the game, come back. You're back by 11 o'clock, midnight. That's fine with me. I do the same thing. I work in Grand Rapids in the off season, 4 hours round trip, go back and forth, spend a weekend in Grand Rapids. Can do that because of the proximity to Midland. And so, 4 or 5 weekends in a month during the off season, we probably spend 2 to 3 of them here, one in Grand Rapids, one in Detroit, and then maybe quarterly we shoot up to Traverse City. That's awesome. I think the other part of it that we haven't talked about yet is proximity to the number of airports we have, right? Like MBS as an asset for us. That's the only thing my wife will fly now.
Yeah. It's right here.
Yeah. But one, because she knows I'll drive her and pick her up back and forth. So that's very convenient for her. But we still do fly Detroit a lot. But there have been opportunities for us to like fly Flint and fly Lansing, fly MBS, fly Detroit. And they're all within a drive for us. And they are from Detroit. But the convenience of MBS to this region, I had a trip to New Orleans, Austin a few weeks back, and it was cheaper for me to fly out of MBS than it was out of Detroit, and save me the 4 hours of drive time, save me the 4 days of $20 a day parking, and it was $200 cheaper to make the same flight from MBS connected through Detroit, save me the time of driving, the cost of parking, and instead of being $700 to fly out of Detroit, it was $500 out of MBS, and I was like, this is awesome. This is a total asset piece, and I'll check it all the time. And sometimes it's not as convenient, but yeah, proximity to those 3 cities is like massive. If our friends who are in Grand Rapids say, hey, we're going to go do a weekend trip in Traverse City, you guys down? Yeah, that's easy for us. Hey, we're going to Petoskey, you guys down? Sure. Hey, we're going to Alpena, you guys in? Yeah, that's fine with us. We're going to be in Detroit this weekend. We're flying for something. You guys want to come in down? Yeah, we'll be there. And we can say yes to everything because of the proximity to everywhere. It's awesome.
Absolutely amazing. And I agree with that too. And we talked about the ability to drive down and go to a Pistons game. And many people won't know this, but you and I had a very short-lived Pistons podcast at Midland Community Television.
Most viewed in the history of the region.
6-7 years ago. I thought it was funny, though. I turned on, it definitely is the most viewed in the history of the region. I turned on 100.9, and you had Matt DeVries on air. And I heard Matt saying, I'm so surprised, Brad, that you're doing this Pistons podcast with Kevin LaDuke over at MCTV because you're such a big LeBron fan. It's just a LeBron show, right, at that point?
It is, yeah. I've got a LeBron little handheld like face on my desk at the office. actually have a baby photo of LeBron. It's strange enough. My wife thinks it's crazy because it's now in her office. I used to work from
LeBron
home.
as a baby?
Yeah, the elephant photo, the little baby elephant photo. You know
okay,
that one?
yes,
Yeah,
I do know that one. Okay.
Yeah. That one is in our home. The 2020 championship bobblehead with is at our house too. Not a LeBron moment.
No, I think this will be interesting. The next interview I'm doing is with Brandon Lewis, the Dapper agent. He's a huge basketball fan.
Mm-hmm.
And I think he's going to have a different answer than you, but is LeBron the GOAT?
Yes, and you differ from this too, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, you're an MJ guy?
Absolutely.
Okay, as long as you're not a Kobe guy. The Kobe guys are crazy.
Well, that's a hot take to have a hot take.
Yeah, it's just...
And I love Kobe. Huge Kobe fan.
Me too. Well, I do too, because they beat him up in 2004, and he was tragic in that NBA Finals.
Hey, man, the first time I ever cried tears of joy was that championship in 2004.
Yeah. Yeah, that spurred my love for sports and basketball, I think, was that 2004 championship. It's tragic that they've maybe been the worst basketball franchise in the NBA since that point, but that was the moment for me. That was the moment for me to start. I was 8, 9 years old, so super formative, just coming into consciousness at that point. And we had, my dad got us like 5 to 10 games a year for the 3 years after that, and that's where my love for basketball. My mom used to like get off of work early. When I used to get off of school at like 3 o'clock at that point, we would immediately go to the Palace and sit in the parking lot until they allowed us physically into the building. I think as season ticket holders, you could get in 2.5 to 3 hours before tip. So we would go courtside and I would watch warm-ups and I would get autographs from the guys who would autograph, and my mom would just sit there with me. I'd be full uniform, Chauncey Billups #1 jersey, Detroit Pistons shorts, headband, the whole thing. And that's... Yeah, that 2004 title is like, I still have the banner hanging in our house right now, the 2004 title.
So good. I mean, I would go, I'd have the tearaway pants on.
Oh, yeah, the tearaways.
My Rip Hamilton shirt. I still wear my Rip Hamilton jerseys to games.
The tearaways.
His dad follows me on Instagram. That's my claim to fame.
Oh, wow.
So, hey, I got Big Rip on Insta. Shout out Big Rip if you're watching. But those are just such great times, and I'll always have a love for the Detroit Pistons because of that. But, man, we need a little bit of love from them at this point.
Yeah, it needs a little juice.
And you are renewing season tickets. You're going back for more?
Of course. Yeah, I'm a sucker. So, yeah, we're actually upgraded like a sucker this year. So I'm excited. Cade Cunningham extension today. That's my one true fandom team. I'm basically not a fan of much else. I did a lot of sports talk radio when I was in college and when I graduated, and so that kind of made me jaded towards all the teams because you kind of have to be on air every day, but I've held on to my Pistons fandom. That's the one thing I have.
Hey man, we got to have something we love. I mean, I'm a huge Detroit City Football Club fan, and I think a lot of that is whatever brings you that feeling of community or feeling of closeness to something, and it's just something bigger than yourself, right? It's the one place you can go. I can't control the outcome, but I'm here and I feel like I have stake in the game. And when you can be a little bit louder and you can give your love to a club or a team, and you can become a part of that experience, it does make you feel like you're a part of the game. And I just absolutely love that sporting experience. And the last time with Annie, we did a draft, and my draft with Annie was her 5 favorite albums that came out in the time that she was working at retail, selling different records. So we went back and forth about some early 2000s music. And you and I talked about a few things. Will we do ballparks? Well, I mean, neither of us can pick Dow Diamond #1. So then we're like, nah, we can't do that.
Well, and I strangely don't get to many ballparks because I work all summer. And so I get to roughly 1 to 2 Tigers games a year. In fact, I'm going to one coming up shortly here when the Dodgers are in town. But that's it. Like, I don't go to other Major League Baseball stadiums, as much as it'd be cool, because we all have passes into them as minor league baseball employees. But I don't get to, so we get to every minor league baseball stadium free whenever we want.
Wow.
And then Major League Baseball stadiums, we have some strings to pull too. But yeah, I could go to any minor league baseball stadium in the country with a pass. But when do I ever have time to do that? Like, we're here all the time.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So what's on your short list for a stadium you want to go to then?
In the minors?
Minors, majors, doesn't matter.
Oh, in the majors, I've never been to Dodger Stadium. I can't believe it after 10 years. There was a couple, I was talking with some friends the other day. I was like, how is that even possible? And it's like, well, I would have to go in early March before we start, or the moment our season ends. And for the most part, we play in the playoffs, the Loons do every year. So then we get extended, and then my wife and I usually schedule vacations right afterwards. So it's hard to get out there. Dodger Stadium, certainly. The Giant Stadium, formerly Candlestick, right?
Yeah.
I think that'd be great. I've toured PNC Park in Pittsburgh, which I don't think it's called PNC anymore. Have you been there?
I've been there. I saw a game there. I think it is still called PNC.
Okay. So my dad's side of my family is from Pittsburgh. I love the city of Pittsburgh. I think it's like set up really well. I like the location of the ballpark. It's obviously great with the rivers there. I would love to go there. Yankee Stadium, obviously, Fenway. I have no real desire to see Wrigley, I don't think. I've been outside of Wrigley Stadium, right? We've all toured Wrigleyville.
Incredible. If you're ever going with a group, if you're outside of Wrigley and you were on top of those apartments across the way, you can get one ticket that's all food, all drink, everything included.
And just
because
watch
you're not
there.
within the ballpark, you're on the rooftop. And it's always a banger with, it looks like bachelor and bachelorette parties rolling through there. And it's kind of, if you're going on a date, that's weird atmosphere sometimes. But Wrigley's pretty incredible. I've been to Fenway. I have to consider it number one. I don't think it's close.
In the Monster or no? Like, did you sit on the Monster?
No, I did not sit on the Monster. I've toured Fenway, though, twice.
Okay.
So doing a tour, anytime you can do a ballpark tour, I find that to be extremely valuable. Even Comerica Park, my grandpa and I toured Comerica Park recently. And you get to see areas of the ballpark you never see. And
all those stadiums are so much bigger than we realize.
There's stuff hiding in these like special areas. Toronto's a fun time.
Okay. I've been, again, outside of that ballpark. I've been to all these cities. I've just never been to the baseball stadiums because we always travel in the winter. So
we couldn't count down ballparks then. Okay. And we couldn't do stadiums. We talked about doing ballpark food, but how about we audible a little bit here?
Okay. Well, this is a hot.
This is not in the rundown.
Hot change.
So, do you think we could do 3 Detroit-based announcers with you getting first pick?
Oh.
Or just 3 favorite sports announcers, but they have to be different sports. Each one has to be a different sport. Okay.
Wow. All right. Who gets the first pick?
You do.
Snake style or no?
We'll just go back and forth. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. No need to complicate this. Number 1. Wow. And I can only take one from each sport.
Correct.
That's incredible. Okay, so without spending too much time on this, I'm just going to start with a guy who I cater my basketball calls to. I think I sound like him, or at least attempt to sound like him, voice, cadence, vocabulary, and he's not a super national guy, but he does the NBA, and he does in particular the WNBA. He's the voice of the WNBA. He works for the Nets broadcast, Ryan Ruocco, who's a young guy, works out in New York, does the WNBA. I really like him for NBA games.
What does he make appearances on? Because I've seen or heard Ruocco a few times. Like,
so he hosts a podcast, I think, with CC Sabathia.
Okay.
Is that
yes? I believe that is it. Yeah. Because I got the cover CC with like it's in his.
He's a bald guy.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So that's a little off topic, but I'll take him to start.
Okay. I'm going to go basketball as well, and I'm not going to overcomplicate it, and I'm not going to let recency bias ruin this. I got to take George Blaha number 1.
Blaha, okay.
Just have to go with it. I mean, if you're talking about connection to it, and I'm not talking style, you're probably going to approach this much differently than I will.
Yeah.
But the emotional connection to all of those games,
correct.
And, let's retire George. This is my plea. George, love watching you. It's time to retire, but you are my number 1 pick.
Yeah, he may die in the chair, one of those guys for sure. He does Michigan State football too, so I hear a lot of him because we carry Michigan State football, so hear a lot of him, grew up with him, mimicked him when I was a kid. It's a great pick. Okay, so now the decision for me leads to what Joe do I take here? And on the baseball side of things, I guess, so Joe Buck does both football and baseball and does a lot of Fox Baseball World Series for years. He is like very polarizing for some reason. I think as a broadcaster, I think he's awesome. I think most people don't like him because he's like, his tone is a little like down here and a little like aggressive or harsh. Plus people think he's negative. I'll go Joe Davis, voice of the Dodgers, young guy, does Fox Baseball now, voice of the World Series 2, taking over for Joe Buck, voice of the Dodgers. He told a great story recently on a podcast with Rich Eisen where one of the first times he took the job, he wasn't going to take the Dodgers job. Also, he's from Grand Rapids area in Michigan, so that's cool too. But he got a call from Vin Scully. He screened the call and didn't take it. And then afterwards, he was like, what the heck am I doing not taking this call from Vin Scully? Vin left him a message. And my first year with the Loons in 2015 was one of Vin's last years. And so I didn't get a chance to listen to him a ton. But obviously, Vin is the best. Great storyteller, cadence, voice, tone, all those good things. His wife, Joe's wife, put the voice message that Vin Scully left him in like a Build-A-Bear teddy bear and put the voice message of it. And so Joe in his office can press the thing, and it's Vin Scully's voice telling him how much it would mean to him and the Dodgers for him to be the new voice of the Dodgers. And it was so cool. I think the Dodgers have had the best television booth for 60 years now between Vin and Joe. So I'll take Joe Davis.
Amazing. So with my second pick,
Yeah.
I'm going on this trajectory, right? We're going to stay local here. I'm going to go with somebody from Detroit City Football Club.
Okay.
It's not Neil Rule.
Okay.
Shout out to Neil, but it's not Neil Rule, also the voice of the Oakland men's basketball.
Yeah.
It's a young man by the name of Jarrett Mackey. He's been calling the U.S. Women or the USL women's games for Detroit City Football
And he's
Club.
good? Really good?
He's really good, but what I like about it is I met Jarrett as a young man in the supporter section at a Detroit City Football Club match.
Wow.
And we used to just chop it up about broadcasting or media. And he went to Michigan State University, and he's called a lot of stuff over there. So now being able to turn a women's match on and just experience that and see him in that space, I think that's just really cool to see dreams come true in this area. Wow. And it's a lot of the journey you're talking about. Just local kid, loves the club and now works for the club. And he has a day-to-day position with the club, but he gets to call these women's matches now. And it's absolutely amazing.
That's really cool. From supporter section to voice of the team.
Yeah.
That's really cool. All right, final pick for me. I'm going to go hockey here. I'm not a huge hockey guy, but again, you and I kind of taking this from a different lens. I think he's as good as it gets technically, and I think most hockey fans realize what I'm probably going to say, in Doc Emmerich, who also has a home here in Michigan. So I haven't gone all three Michigan guys. No, I haven't. Ruco wasn't. But yeah, Doc Emmerich, who I met a bunch of years ago, he has a cabin like in Port Huron or something and like lives here in the off season. But I mean, just a wizard of the craft and has, I think, developed probably most of the guys that we hear on a national level now on the hockey side are all mimicked in the light of Doc Emmerich. He's amazing.
That's awesome. So I haven't done baseball yet.
Okay.
I got to go with the voice I hear the most. It's the one I hear in my car. I turn on the radio.
Right.
It's the person I make a text message to when I hear something funny. It's the person I say to my girlfriend, oh, look, it's the sultry tones of Brad Tunney.
Right.
So, Brad, I know that's a cop-out pick, but we are truly lucky to have you here, and I cannot believe you've been calling Loons games for 10 years? 10 years.
Well, I think because of the lost COVID season, 9 years. Yeah.
Unbelievable. So let's talk about your current booth. You have guys working at the spot now. You're no longer the young guy on staff?
No.
How does that feel? Like, what's that like closing out here?
Responsibilities are way greater because now I can't just be the immature 23-year-old kind of doing whatever I want. And so, the booth we have right now is amazing. Like our team on the radio side of things, and I'll speak to the radio station because obviously the team at the ballpark is great. Our leadership from Chris Mudhank and Yana Shudakova and Eric Ramsayer, the culture that's at that ballpark and the reason why I love working there so much is cultivated by great leaders. I think like we all believe in the leaders that we work under.
Absolutely.
I think it's understated what good leadership can mean to an organization, and not just good leadership like, oh, do they pay you well and do they care about you and like do they offer you the time off? Do they not question you and things like that? It's like, do they truly trust the affordability that they're giving to you? A lot of organizations may afford opportunities to employees that then when those employees make those decisions, there's still a lack of trust there. That's not the case with us. And I think most people at our organization don't necessarily understand those three in particular, Yana, Eric, and Chris, or Mud as we call them, behind the scenes, what bad leadership can look like and what good leadership and what we have right now looks like too, and shouldn't be taken for granted. So that's one thing. But for my end on the radio station, and so my role is as general manager of the radio station and our digital marketing consultative business. And so not only do I get to broadcast the games, leading some sales efforts, doing this on the radio station side, and our team of Sarah Stockford and John Vicari and Ben Bosher. Sarah's a rock star seller who has worked all over the place, the Cleveland Browns, tickets and sponsorships, and Comcast doing streaming television, and has done medical sales. Like she's touched every part of the sales industry, and she's still in her mid-20s, like as a rock star, and is a work ethic and understanding and smarts and just relationships and does everything right. And then John, who is not local, but has started to gain an appreciation for what this place means, right? Like has moved here full time. His parents visit him here now. Is in a relationship here now. He's from Queens, New York, and so comes from a really big area. Yankees fan, all of that, big city. Went to Ithaca College in upstate New York. All he knows is big city, big broadcast program, and now he lives in Midland. And it's like he appreciates it. And I always tell folks, and this is not to blow smoke, he is like he was grown in a lab for the role he has right now, truly. because the role that he's in, for most people around the country that have assistant broadcasters the way I do, most do not have a full-time role the way he does here. There's 120 minor league teams in the country. It's required now for every team to have a single broadcaster, and a lot of them are not even full-time the way we are and are lucky enough to have. So let's say 90 of the 120 are full-time. Of those 90 that have a second broadcaster on the air with them that, spells their lead broadcaster, I would say maybe half of those 90 have a secondary broadcaster. So there's only really like 45 jobs in the one that John has, and maybe 10 of them are full-time. And so his role is fairly rare. But not only does he do broadcasting for the Loons, which he's awesome at, he was in our league previously as a lead broadcaster. So like that's really cool to know that we have someone who did it on his own for an entire season in our league. And then he also loves sports talk radio because he's from New York. So most of the time he can't shut up about anything. They're always talking, and he grew up with great sports talk radio and Mike Francesa and Michael Kay and all them. So he moved to Cleveland and did sports talk radio. And so we have our own live local shows and being with the radio station. And so he's got opinions and he needs to get out all the time. So he's like grown in a lab to do this play-by-play and this sports talk radio and have the work ethic to do both because he's from the industry and grew up as a broadcaster like I did. So he's perfect. And then Ben Bosher, who we entrusted to put on the air when he was 21 to host our live local show. Station had not had a local show in 10 years. And when we rebranded last year, my big pitch was like, are we going to be okay putting a 21-year-old on the air every day? Because I really believe in him. His work ethic is unbelievable. And his passion for firing off takes and being a part of the community, because he's the on-air or the on-field host for the team too, the baseball team, to be a front-facing person. He's also not local, from Grand Rapids, went to school at CMU, and in a month is moving here full-time. Again, moving talent into the region and holding them because they're passionate about being in here. Sarah lived in Nashville, of all places, before she moved back here. Big city. Moving back here because she wanted to be closer to home and believes in Midland and where she's from in Sanford. So us four operating a radio station all under the age of 30 is, when I say unique, like I truly mean it's probably one of a kind. There is no other radio station in the country that has 4 full-time employees that are doing it the way we do it, positioned in our market the way we hope to be seen and felt and positioned and listened to in our market, doing terrestrial radio of all things with an average age of like 26. And we feel really good about it and hope that everyone else does too. So again, yeah, rockstar team that I'm happy have committed themselves here because I would be lost without literally any of them not by our side.
That's amazing. So how can we listen to the show?
Yeah. So 100.9 FM is the radio station heard in your cars, just like it has been for what radio's been around for 60, 70, 80 years. Or on 100.9 The Mitt on the App Store. So Google Play Store, App Store, just search WLUN The Mitt or 100.9 The Mitt, whatever it is. That's the easiest way. The moment you open up the app at any point, the app opens up. Loons broadcasts, obviously on loons.com or on TuneIn Radio, on the Loons app, which you should all have downloaded to see the schedule and games and everything else. And we're going to get the Loons schedule added to Max Loves Midland schedule.
I love that. I didn't even have to press you.
No, that's an easy get. Would love to have like our high school broadcasts when we do high school football games on Max Loves Midland schedule. That'd be really cool. On MLB TV, MLB app, 1009themitt.com for the website, and or just stop into the ballpark. I truly say this, like most broadcasters are very protective of their booths. In fact, we're on calls in the off season, and it drives me crazy because there are broadcasters that do minor league games around the country. They're like, oh my goodness, I just can't get our front office off our backs. They just want to bring guests in all the time and tour us like we're zoo animals. It's like, yeah, what you do is really cool. You think it's cool, right? I press them. It's like, you think it's really cool what you do, right? Like, yeah, but I don't want people standing behind me when I do it. Oh, why? They think it's cool. You should relish in the opportunity that what you do, people think is cool. There aren't people showing up to like an accountant's office and watching them over their shoulder like, well, that's really cool. I mean, no offense to the accountants. My dad was an accountant, so that's why I use that joke.
My girlfriend's an accountant. She's going to love this joke.
Oh, that's crazy. My dad was an accountant his whole life. And like, when he was like, oh, you're coming to work with me today, it's like, can I watch paint dry? Again, it's no offense, but he used to love when I made that joke because it's true. Because he used to love coming to the ballpark, and because it's fun. If you're ever at the ballpark, tell the security guy at the bottom of the steps, hey, Brad told me to come up and visit the broadcast booth. And I would love to have you and stand in and hang out and talk to you about the Loons and the broadcast and how you listen and get your thoughts. Tell me you hate it, whatever it is. Play mini hoops behind us. Bring your kids up. We'll have Louis sign baseballs for him. We'll have John sign baseballs for him as much as he hates it. We'll do all that. Like, make it a part of the experience for your kids that day.
So we are so lucky to have you here in Midland, Brad, and I'm just really happy we're able to share this moment and have this conversation. And we talk about all this amazing stuff going on in Midland. So something I'm going to ask everyone every single week. Looking forward to the future of Midland, what do you want for this community?
Yeah, I had to sit with this one for a long time when we sat, and then I thought about it for days afterward too. Because we're all executing all of our jobs in our lives every day, it's hard to like really think about it as opposed to just like jumping on the Ask Midland page and being like, hey, why don't we have this, right? The Ask Midland page goes crazy with that stuff. Which to me, I love it. Most people are like, why do you engage in the Ask Midland page? I love it.
Because it's the largest cross-section of people communicating within the town.
Anywhere.
And
it's all day.
And they're all right there.
Yeah. And so, yeah, there are some crazy posts, but it's cool now that Facebook does the little AI thing where it summarizes the 100 comments for you. And it's like,
so good.
Okay, I don't need to read the 60 comments today because everyone actually seems to be pretty positive about this topic. Anyway, for us, we live just off Saginaw. We're across kind of like where Lalonde's Market in that neighborhood is. And so we visit Lalonde's a lot. And we're on the other side we walk past the country club a lot when we walk our dogs. And we use the dog park that's over there, or the big woods area.
Absolutely.
We would really love the circle to be developed a little bit more, right? Not only because it's close to us proximity-wise, but I think for us, we engage in downtown a lot because I work down there. And so it's easy for my wife to, at the end of the night be like, hey, oh, it looks like you played a quick game. You want to meet at Three Bridges? You want to meet at Witchcraft? Yeah, sure. I'll walk down there. I'll meet you down there. You want to grab lunch at Pizza Baker? Like, do all these things, right? It'd be great if we had a secondary location in Midland where we could congregate that wasn't that same spot. And so it's not to say that we've exhausted our opportunity downtown, because we still visit all of those places downtown, Grazie and Oxygen and 118 and all of those places that I just mentioned too, and Molasses. We visit all of those places all the time, still, monthly. But that is a singular congregation area for us. It would be really cool, the same way when the beer garden was out on Larkin still, we could go there. A little different for me when I was at the ballpark, 'cause it's like, oh, do I have to go to the ballpark to drink now? But when it was on Larkin, it was cool, because we could go there as a secondary location that wasn't on Main Street physically. It wasn't at Brinstar, it wasn't at, all these places downtown. But if the circle was developed and had a restaurant that we could sit outside and have patio work, or there was a restaurant with a bar, and so there's two locations now there, we would feel like we would have a secondary community to engage in that we don't really feel like right now. And so at times when we want that secondary community, we shoot to Bay City or Saginaw, right? I think to us, critically looking at the future of it, we would be retained here a lot more on the nights that we seek a dinner and a drink or just going to hang out, because we utilize Boomerang in that way right now, but then we're out of the circle, right? And figuring out a way to have the circle be a little more walkable and then have it be developed where there's a restaurant and a bar, because then you can engage in restaurant and bar, and then, we can walk down to the Bully, which is great. Or start at the Bully, walk there, go have dinner, finish there, wake up in the morning, go to Boomerang, and connect the dots on all these businesses in that area, right? So that's where critically, my wife and I spent some time on it. It's like, it'd be really cool if we had the circle, because sometimes, if we visit Main Street 3 times in a week, the next week we're probably going over to Bay City, right? So that was kind of our thought process, because we'd much rather stay here, because the circle is a 2-minute drive from our home, a 10-minute walk with our dogs.
I love that. So hopefully here in a couple of years, you and I are going to be able to sit down and have dinner in the circle.
That's right.
The dream, right?
That's right.
We're looking forward to it. I know you talked about third places, and you said that I get to go to the ballpark and have a beer and eat dinner, and you don't necessarily get to use the ballpark as a third place. Whenever we're shooting the podcast here, if you want to come be my fact checker, come on through, come to the show, have a beer and have some dinner.
Hey, all right.
That could be a good time.
Are these scheduled on Max Loves Midland?
You and I we'll link up here,
Otherwise, I'm gonna have like a full audience here. I'll bring like half the front office with me and say, hey, look, Kevin said we can come here for a podcast recording and have a beer, so that's on him.
I love that. So your last pitch. Here's your camera right here. What's one thing you want to tell people? Make sure they check out.
Make sure they check out. Wow. Just come to the ballpark. Like, truly, I'm sure most of you, I don't love doing hard sells because I don't think they're necessary, truly. I think the ballpark and what we do at the radio station speaks for itself. Come with your kids, genuinely bring them up to the booth. Like, I want the attention, not because I want the physical attention. I want the attention so your kids can see our view, interact with what we get to interact with on a daily basis. I want to make a moment for them, truly. I want them to shoot mini hoops in our radio station. So check that out. I want people to say hello, right? Like, what do you like about the ballpark and what do you like about the radio station? Come say hello to me and say, hey, I listened the other day and you were saying this and that was actually wrong. Right? Like, I love that. My wife likes it too when she knows I'm wrong. So do that. I like to think I'm pretty approachable, and I want to be approachable because I want to be a part of the community because we're here and we're going to be here and we want to be a part of it in a big way. So make us a part of it in a big way.
Well, it's awesome, Brad. Thank you so much for being here with us today. And I know we'll have you on again. We got to get through every Midlander first. I know there's 80,000
Every
plus.
single one, huh?
So, 100, wow. 200. I haven't done the math, but whenever we get there, we'll have you on for a second time. So I appreciate you being here with us, Brad. And also want to say we appreciate JNC Media for taking care of us. Thank you to Josh, our producer. And thank you for all of you guys for being with us today. If you haven't checked out Max Loves Midland yet, make sure you go to maxlovesmidland.com. We have our community calendar. There's community stories, community information, and so much stuff for you to interact with. Get more familiar with our structure and what we have going on. Join our email list and become a part of the work here in Midland. And as always, when life gives you a bridge and it doesn't work, just build a tridge. See you next time. Subscribe wherever you consume media. Max Loves Midland is your entertainment, resources, and collective improvement hub for Midland County. Plan your next adventure in Midland at maxlovesmidland.com.